It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Kyle Benedict as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. As always, great to have you in studio with us today. Vic Morfin with the Coconino National Forest and Brady Smith also in studio. Welcome back, guys.
Thanks. Good morning.
People should be familiar with you. Brady, they hear you on the radio all the time.
I hope so.
Yeah, I would hope so too. You're a public information officer, and Vic, you are the forest fuel specialist, and you were here twice last year, both times, I believe, right around Slide Fire, just after it.
You bet. Yes.
Yeah, so it's good to have you back. Let's start with that, the Slide Fire. I haven't heard too much about it since it happened last year, but how are things coming along back in the forest with the Slide Fire?
Well, you know, that area is recovering just as normal as could be, and hopeful as could be. You know, we had, shortly after that fire, we had the burned area emergency response team come in there, and that's after any large fire, in essence, and they do work on assessing what needs to be done, some of the risks, and the things associated with flooding that are possible, especially during the monsoon season, and then rehabilitation. And so that a lot of people might have been seeing a lot of mulch drops by the helicopters through that area if they're driving through Oak Creek Canyon. And so those all help to kind of stabilize that area, but also to kind of regenerate growth in that area. And, you know, it's been doing that, and we kind of dodged a bullet, I think, in the monsoons by not having a huge flash flood in that area. But, you know, it's recovering as normal, I think, and people are back in there and hiking, and it's a popular place, obviously. We
prepared for the worst and got the best, I think, out of that thing. I think we did. Now, we know that it was caused by a campfire there near Slide Rock State Park. There's that little knoll right there in Oak Creek Canyon that the fire started at. Do we have anything more on who may have caused the fire?
Well, it's still under investigation, and we know it was human-caused. So, you know, our investigators, I know I've spoken to our lead patrol captain for the Northern Arizona law enforcement folks for the Forest Service, and he told me they're really close to finding a person or persons that are responsible for that. So they're following up some really promising leads, he said. So, you know, you might be hearing about something hopefully soon.
That would be great. That would really be great. That's one of the toughest things to get from the Forest Service is when we, not when the arrest is made, but just the investigation leading up to it. So I don't want people thinking that we've forgotten about it and
no, definitely
fire's over, so, you know, it's what's done is done. All right, so 'tis the season for defensible space. My wife and I went out to lunch this weekend, and right there at the front door is Living with Wildfire was this big brochure, which I imagine you had part to do, and all kinds of agencies had something to do with this, and Living with Wildfire. This has been a huge thing. We've had you guys in numerous times over the last few years to talk about this, and the word defensible space, that little phrase right there, has just really been something we focus on year after year. Now, we're going to have kind of local fire agencies come in and talk about defensible space around our homes and how to deal with that, because it is the fire season now. We had brush fire Monday the 23rd along I-40. So
we did.
Obviously it's here. Prescott Valley has had a couple of brush fires. Chino Valley's had some brush fires already. So despite the fact we had some snow and some rain and stuff, it's already drying out. And now we have our spring winds, which is always, that's one of the big things, right, Vic, is the spring winds. Don't they really change how the forest looks?
You bet. We also had a fire yesterday just outside of in East Flag that got up to a couple acres on state land. And it's that wind that you get in the spring, early summer that really drives our fires and can turn a fire that we tend to catch at a quarter acre or a couple acres into a larger fire.
Right.
So it's that dryness coupled with the wind that can really give us problem fires.
It sounds like we got lucky yesterday because it started on, they said Summit Fire said it started on the east side of the I-40, and then it jumped the interstate, which is pretty impressive, and got into the median, and then it kind of stayed in the median from there. So I guess we got kind of lucky with that one. Back to the defensible space. Each person is kind of told, especially with all of us living either close or in the forest, to create defensible space around our homes, which is a big help to forest fires and forest firefighters. What is being done, or what has been done over the winter, Vic, to kind of create defensible space around those homes that are so close to the forest?
Every year round we're pretty busy trying to deal with the fuels issues and do fuels treatments. There's been a lot of work done this past winter in terms of getting those piles burned. We did a fair bit of underburning in the fall.
What does that mean?
Prescribed fire, lighting not just the piles you see in the forest, but actually broadcast burning with drip torches and getting larger areas burned.
Okay.
And we tend to do a lot of that in September, October, when it's dry enough but still moist enough to where we can maintain control of the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of thinning efforts, a lot of pile burns, some underburning months ago. We'll be back into the underburn mode likely in the next 30 days or thereabouts. We'll be doing some spring burning.
Okay.
So the forest and some of our partners have been really busy treating the landscape, trying to get fire back into the forest.
Are there any areas in particular that you guys are looking at? Because I know the area of Mountain Air and Coconino Village was kind of thinned out a while back, and there is still some thinning going on back in there. But are there other areas that were particular hot spots for you guys to take a look at this year?
Certainly, the area you just described, that whole area around Herald Ranch, and although thinning's been done down in Mountain Air Coconino, we still have a lot of burning to do behind those thinning treatments. So the Mountain Air Coconino is another hot spot where we'll be treating, and down at Munns Canyon, Munns Park, we have another broadcast burn just west of I-17 that we'll be trying to implement.
How many acres are we talking about, do you know?
On that Munns, we're only talking about 500, 400 acres. But then when you look at the greater Flagstaff area, it's thousands of acres. In the spring, we'll tend to get 500, 1,000. The window's really short, so we'll be burning a day or two and then fire season.
You guys kind of, we're using Flagstaff because Coconino National Forest, of course, is here, but Flagstaff and those little communities around it. So do you guys kind of, how far out do you go and figure, okay, we need to make sure we've got our defensible space? About how far would you like to see that?
Well for us, defensible space is almost spaceless. For instance, we can easily be treating 15, 20 miles southwest of town, understanding that we could get a fire start and have fire in town that night. Fire could easily spread from Turkey Butte 15, 20 miles away and be up into Flagstaff at the end of the shift. That was the main concern with slide fire. Even though slide fire started way down at Slide Rock State Park, had the fire been established in Pump House Wash, it would have been in Flagstaff at the end of that first shift.
That was the key, Pump House Wash.
It certainly was. And so when we talk about defensible space, we're basically talking about our forest. Because regardless of distance, 15, 20 miles isn't that far for a fire to spread rapidly, like within a day or two.
Okay.
So our defensible space is the national forest.
Huge.
It is.
And there's a lot more of it, too, out there to deal with. I mean, we've really been aggressive over the last few years, but the reins are off a little bit, and you guys are really being able to get out there and introduce fire back into the forest, right?
You bet. But you look at, on the Coconino National Forest alone, we have about 800,000 acres of ponderosa pine. So, boy, that's a challenge. Even if you're burning 50,000 acres a year, it's going to take you 16 years to get around the horn, so to speak. So,
and then start right over again at the beginning. Huh?
Right.
All right, we'll take our first break. Coconino National Forest Fuels Specialist Vic Morpin, Head PIO Brady Smith in studio today. Stick around, Countywide, back in just a couple minutes.
Headaches and back pain are two of the top reasons people choose Mosing Chiropractic. Dr. Mosing also treats symptoms of numbness and tingling, as well as those injured in auto or work accidents. Dr. Mosing uses gentle chiropractic techniques, as well as electric muscle stim and cold laser therapies. Call Dr. Mosing today at 634-0733. No spine left behind at Mosing Chiropractic.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for information on how to provide even better care for the person who wants to care of you.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
Welcome back to Countywide. We're talking with the Coconino National Forest today, getting kind of update on the forest in their area. Just so you know, we're going to be talking with Prescott National Forest. Pete Gordon will be in studio towards mid to late April. We're going to have local firefighters coming in talking about defensible space, and it's really going to be the focus again this year like it was last year. I think I told you guys both that we're trying to be a little more proactive with the shows and get people to start thinking ahead of time on what we need to do to be prepared for the wildfire season. Do you think last year we had a bad wildfire season, or was it kind of typical? Slide fire seemed like the biggest wildfire we had, because it was human caused and it was in Oak Creek Canyon. I mean, it was just devastating. But was it a bad wildfire season, or?
I think in the Southwest area and nationally, it wasn't necessarily a bad fire season. It was kind of typical, maybe even below average.
Okay.
But I know on the Coconino National Forest, we got hit pretty hard.
We
had our first fire in March, which is atypical. Normally it's like May, and then we had we had some fires in April that were problem fires or approached problem fires, and then obviously the slide fire was a big one. So it seemed like we were on the edge. We were on the edge of catching fires and on the edge of catching fires really early in the season this past year, and usually that's not the case until June is when we get those problem fires, and normally not so many of them. We had a lot last year.
That's why we're here today, to kind of hopefully curtail some of that from happening again. Now, the brush fire yesterday, that sounds to me like possibly a cigarette butt out the window along I-40. One less spark kicked off last year. Was the first year Arizona did that. I know it started in California, but last year was our first year. Yeah. So we're also telling folks to make sure they're not dragging their chains. Yep. If you get a flat tire, get off the side of the road as quick as you can so you're not kicking up a bunch of sparks, things like that. Anything that causes one less spark would be perfect to keep things from burning down. Let's talk about winter real quick, Vic. Was winter good for the Coconino National Forest? Was it a great winter for it, or was it just so-so kind of?
I think it was more in the so-so category.
That's too bad.
It was a little disappointing when you look at snowpack. We're clearly not where we need to be with snowpack, and that's the type of moisture that sticks around. When we're getting rain, it's great, but when we get snowpack, it lasts and protects us a little more in fire season.
Now, last year you talked a little bit about that snowpack, especially, I know last year, I think everybody that came in, I think Don Muse was here as well from the Coconino National Forest, was talking about how those large fuels, those big logs that you see in the forest that you sit on to take a break, those were burning all the way down to ash, which was really kind of surprising you guys.
Right. That's a good indication of drought, and snowpack is the what we call 1,000-hour fuels, the big logs. And normally, when big logs burn, they just reduce in diameter. You burn the outside of them, so to speak, and reduce them down. But during like the slide fire and a lot of last year, they were burning down to ash. And so that's a good indication that things are too dry and we're getting too much fuel consumption.
Did they get that pack this year, that snowpack that's going to kind of waterlog those logs?
It doesn't seem. We're well below normal snowpack. So it seems that we'd get a lot of good log consumption this year, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
Okay. Yeah. Forest overall right now, what's the current condition? Because I think you're probably out there every week checking on it and seeing how the fuels are doing.
You bet. Our Southwest Predictive Services predicts for significant fire potential. March, April, they're predicting normal. And then as we get into May, June, the critical season, they're actually saying below normal.
Oh, really?
Fire potential.
Okay.
But we get an update in the next 10 days. They'll update that with new data. So that's the best information we're getting right now. And what it seems, the prediction is that we're going to get these pulses of moisture every week or so. And that will kind of moderate things. So it's not going to do much for the drought. It's still not much moisture, but the way the systems are predicted to come in and give us those pulses every few days or every week, would be good for fires because it would reduce those intensities, if that makes sense.
Fingers are probably crossed on that one then.
Yeah, that would be nice to see.
Last year, you're the one that kind of taught me about ladder fields too. I'd said it in the news numerous times, and I kind of felt kind of silly because I didn't realize exactly what they were. But when you look at a pine tree, you see those branches at the bottom that are, well, it's a doggone ladder. It just looks like a ladder, right, when you're looking at it. Do you guys go out there and actually literally walk through the forest with stuff and just break those off and saw them off and try to get all of them?
Generally not. We try to we try to do that with fire.
Okay.
Naturally, fire favors or selects those ladder fuels, and they tend to burn. Fires tend to burn that low stuff first, and it won't burn the treetops. So the good thing about prescribed fire is when you put it down, or wildfire, it tends to burn those lower fuels just on its own.
Okay. Something I wanted to bring up. Locals say it. You hear it all the time when you're talking to folks that it's not the locals that are starting these fires. It's the Phoenix people. And sometimes I don't know, the ridicule is probably not the good word, but maybe I focus too much on this up here because we're the locals and we know better than to, flick that cigarette butt out the window when we're driving through Oak Creek Canyon, where, the chains and stuff like that. We're all educated very well up here that these are our forests. We love our forests. We live in our forests, and that's why we're here. People seem to want us to talk to Phoenix. They want to blame a lot of Phoenix folks coming up on the weekend, and they build their, throw their tent down or their camper, they fire, and then boom, next thing you know, they leave Sunday afternoon, Monday morning, and their campfire is still burning. Are we doing anything to, and I don't want to blame anybody in general. Anybody who makes this mistake is making a huge mistake. Are we doing anything to kind of maybe help educate the Phoenix area? Because we're working on it so hard up here. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's south of Yavapai County, I guess is what I'm talking about. Are we working down there on educating the southern part of the state?
Well, that's always the challenge because, I think we live in such a transient society. Everybody moves all the time for jobs or whatever the case may be. So I encounter people in Flagstaff that have moved there that are brand new from Michigan or wherever the case they came from, but they haven't been there for many years. And the same way in Phoenix, you have a large population of people that have moved from different states and are now moving into Phoenix, and then they come up to recreate or to camp on the Coconino because they're trying to get out of the heat. But I've seen the same mistakes by locals themselves. I mean, I was just thinking as you were saying that, I was coming back from a long day working the slide fire and doing public information, and I was following this person that lives in Flagstaff, and I noticed they were smoking and they flicked their cigarette right out the door as I was following them. And that was in the midst of smoke hanging over Flagstaff from the slide fire. I mean, it couldn't have been more apparent than it was that day that there is fire danger, and yet there's people that still continue to do that. But there is always a challenge to reach audiences who use the forest, and a large portion of that are people from Phoenix. They come up and they recreate, and they build campfires, and they want to have that camping experience. But I think it's just a lot of people don't understand what it takes to put out a campfire. They bring water for drinking, they bring water for cooking, they bring water for washing their hands, but typically you don't bring water when you're camping. You don't bring 6 gallons of it to put out a campfire, and that's typically the least amount of what it takes to really put a campfire out cold to touch. And so when you leave campfires that are unattended and have that heat in them, they can hold that heat for a long time, and if a windy day pops up, then it can produce a wildfire from that.
All right, good point. People are always moving into the state, and they're from other states, and some of those states are pretty darn wet. You go in the forest, and it's probably difficult to start a campfire to begin with, but you come here, and it doesn't take very long. We have to take our second break. Vic Morfin and Brady Smith in studio today from Coconino National Forest. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
In for the interview.
Oh, yeah, of course.
All right, we got your personal references, your resume, high school diploma or equivalent.
Skip the drama. Get your diploma.
Yes, it's right there.
Great.
Take that first step towards a better future. Find free adult education classes at finishyourdiploma.org.
They're coming. Places, everybody.
Light check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Everything looks good on our end.
And lights.
Come alive with the forest. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Looks like it's done.
Don't let salmonella get funky with your chicken. On average, 1 in 6 Americans will get a foodborne illness this year. You can't see these microbes, but they might be there. So learn the right temperature to cook each type of meat. Keep your family safe at foodsafety.gov.
Headaches and back pain are 2 of the top reasons people choose Mosing Chiropractic. Dr. Mosing also treats symptoms of numbness and tingling, as well as those injured in auto or work accidents. Dr. Mosing uses gentle chiropractic techniques, as well as electric muscle stim and cold laser therapies. Call Dr. Mosing today at 634-0733. No spine left behind at Mosing Chiropractic.
Welcome back to Countywide. We've got a couple minutes left in the program. We kind of talked about how winter was on the Coconino National Forest. We should talk about, well, first of all, wildfire season is really always here. It's always prevalent. We've been seeing wildfires since the start of the year this year. What are we doing to kind of be prepared for this year's season?
We're bringing our seasonal firefighters on as we speak, and they'll be going through critical training the next 2-3 weeks. And then generally speaking, we're going to be up and ready in mid-April, early April, fully staffed, and anticipating potential fire season again.
What's the worst month for us for wildfires? What's the really scary months? The months where you sit at home and just say, when's it going to happen?
June.
Yeah, certainly June.
June.
And some years, mid-May in there. It'll start a little early, but yeah, June's the peak.
Yeah.
Peaks, and then we all crossing our fingers for the 4th of July and the monsoon hits and we can all take a breath.
Right.
Hopefully. But then we've got the lightning spark fires too, so. All right. Well, I think we're pretty good. We want people to do the defensible space around their homes. Like we said, flat tires, rims dragging on the ground, that's sparks. One Less Spark campaign is well underway. We started our wildfire PSAs on Yavapai Broadcasting on all the stations. So we've got those going. We don't want people dragging the chains between their vehicle and their camper or their boat or whatever. Make sure we get those pulled up. What's some other spark things? The cigarette butts, of course. We've got others.
Catalytic converters.
Catalytic converters. Don't park on top of tall grass with catalytic converters. I understand that sometimes those also break up inside the car and they'll just spit out the tailpipe down the road. We've seen that on 260, and I believe we saw that on Cornville Road last year as well, where someone's catalytic converter was just falling apart while they were driving down the road, and there's not much you can do about that.
Yeah, I've heard the same kind of thing, and there isn't really much you can do about that.
Find these little pieces of clay off the side of the road, and then all of a sudden they got 5-6 fires going. So, okay. Brady, great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Appreciate it.
And we're going to have you guys back in a month or so, Vic, a couple months to just kind of give us another update. And like I said, we're just going to keep this in everybody's face throughout the spring and summer, and hopefully we'll have no big fires. I'd love that. How about you?
I would love it too.
Yeah.
I appreciate you getting the word out too.
No problem. No problem. All right, that's today's Countywide. We will talk to you again next time.